The Chicago Bulls lose a key game to the Atlanta Hawks, a game that's important in the seeding in the play-in race. But even with that loss, they still are able to clinch their play-in spot due to the Brooklyn Nets losing a game. We're going to talk a little bit about both those things. We're also going to talk about Javonte Green's future with the team and if he can be on the team's play-in roster, and injury updates to Julian Phillips and Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, and Lonzo Ball. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content, man. And unfortunately, we're here to talk about a Bulls loss in a lot of ways. I know I had a live post-game show yesterday, and unfortunately, this was a game where the Bulls did a lot of the kind of nitty-gritty things. They won the rebounding battle, right? They won points off turnovers, even though both teams had about the same amount of turnovers in that. The Bulls did some things. Second chance points, they played pretty good in. Fast break points, they matched pretty well in. But this was another game that the Bulls lost due to simple math. The three-point shooting by the Atlanta Hawks was just something that really helped push that game away for them. They scored 36 more points from the three-point line than what the Chicago Bulls were able to do. And so when you have that, you don't play a modern style of basketball, you don't defend the three-point line well. It wasn't a completely inefficient night. It wasn't the most efficient night either. 39% from the field, just bad. That's bad. 25% from three-point range for the Chicago Bulls. We didn't play a good game of basketball, man. And and I know DeMar after the game said the Bulls did some things right and stuff out there, but defensively, you have to set a tone. We've talked about so many times how important that is for the Chicago Bulls to really set that defensive tone themselves and let that help their offense be more efficient. And the Bulls getting out to a huge run to start out the game. It was like 11-0, 15-0, something like that. And then it just was never really back underhand for the Chicago Bulls after that. We had solid performances. DeMar had 31 points, 10 of 23 shooting. He also chipped in 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 rebounds, 22 points from Kobe White, going 8 of 21 from the field, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, 1 steal from him, 15 points from Ayo Dosunmu, 13 points and 18 rebounds from Andre Drummond. And then Nikola Vucevic has only 5 points but 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. Alex Caruso didn't follow up his hot shooting night with 8 points. And it just kind of was a disappointing loss by the Bulls. This is what it comes down to. The Bulls they played disappointingly in this game. And it goes back to, once again, this Chicago Bulls team just not being able to match the intensity of teams that just refuse to go away. And that's going to be something that continually plagues this team. Three-point shooting is going to be something that continually plagues this team. And these aren't things that are just going to fix themselves all of a sudden because the Chicago Bulls want to try to will it to be. This is something that's just kind of inherently ingrained in who the Chicago Bulls roster is. That's just what it is at this point. This roster has continually suffered from the same shortcomings. Even though, Billy Donovan doesn't really play the team anymore, he's kind of fallen out the roster. Falling out the rotation. And, with Javonte coming back, we saw Terry Taylor play 10 minutes. He played more minutes than Dalen Terry and Batum combined in this game. So, it's those type of things that, it's questionable with the coaching and, Billy Donovan, his situational awareness is always going to be a thing, but it really comes down to three-point shooting. I don't want to make it just about three-point shooting, but the Bulls did enough of the other things well that if they guarded the three-point line better and shot the ball more effectively on the other side of the ball, the Bulls could have still been in this game, man. But unfortunately, down the stretch, the Bulls just did not have enough, and despite some, solid performances from DeMar and Kobe in a lot of ways, it wasn't enough to overcome the Atlanta Hawks. But, so the Hawks now, they're only a half game behind the Bulls for that 9th seed. Their magic number is now only 1. They need one more win or one more Brooklyn Nets loss to lock in their play-in spot as well. And it seems like the Bulls are right now destined for a play-in matchup with the Atlanta Hawks for whatever that's worth, right? And, if the Bulls play like they did last night, and I'll even say this, I don't know, I go back and forth, right? So in a lot of ways, sometimes I look at this and say, I'm kind of less worried and concerned about this team if Trae Young's not on it because they just are even worse defensively. But then again, the three-point shooting is still something that can absolutely cook the Chicago Bulls. So, the fact that the Bulls are destined for that 9-10 matchup, whoever's the 9, whoever's the 10 with the Atlanta Hawks, we'll see what that means for the Chicago Bulls season. Like I've said many times before, when it really just comes down to it, the season's going to be what the season's going to be. And, the Bulls have 6 games left in this season, and all the 6 of those games are going to be important for the Bulls to try to make a move. If they want to host that game, it may not even matter, right? Maybe the Bulls drop down to the 10th seed. They're locked into the play-in spot now. It wouldn't be the first time the Bulls go struggling into a postseason, right? And, the Bulls would have more opportunities at the ping pong balls, the lottery balls at that point in time. And not to say that that's what we should be playing for, but when you really look at it, like, this team has just been disappointing. And it's been disappointing partially because of roster construction. It's been disappointing partly because I don't like the whole play down thing, right? I don't say that the Bulls play down to teams. I just think they don't match the other teams that are the Bulls supposedly are playing down to. I just think they refuse to go away, and the Bulls just don't match that intensity well. I don't think the Bulls come in here and just they're lackadaisical and they feel like they can turn it on. I just think they don't match other teams shooting. They don't match that, they have so many scoring droughts the Chicago Bulls do. But we're headed towards the end of this regular season finally. And whatever that ends up being, whatever that turns into for the Bulls, we'll see, man. I have my thoughts on what I think the Bulls can and should do here going into the postseason and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, man, nothing is going to change. Like, the Bulls are fighting for a 9th seed. Yeah, the Bulls can, and they still can beat some teams in that play-in area. I've talked about that not too long ago. But ultimately, it still comes down to this. Regardless of that, what really are we talking about, right? What are we talking about? I'm sorry, I know a lot of Bulls fans hold on to this thought process of we got to keep DeMar because X, Y. There's no future with DeMar DeRozan. And not to say that DeMar has not earned a contract. He has, but there's no future in that. We are artificially inflating our future if that's what we keep tying ourselves in just to be a play-in team. And yes, the slow start definitely impacts things. If the Bulls didn't have that slow start, there's a conversation to be made on if they could have been more towards the 7 and 6 seed trying to fight for that spot. Those are things that are valid. But you're still putting a lot up to a team that has showed you their limitations, right? A ceiling that has shown you what that is. So, we'll see what the Bulls front office does, man. But, we're headed there to that matchup with Atlanta. They get one more win. It's going to be locked in. It's going to be the Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks as the 9th, 10th seed. Yes, statistically the Bulls still have it, and the Hawks still have a chance to move up to maybe the 8th seed. But, that doesn't seem likely with either pace that the teams are winning games at. But I guess we'll see what happens with that. But one of the players that we have questions on is if the Bulls, they are making the play-in now, will Javonte Green be on the team for the play-in tournament? So he missed last night's game with personal reasons. It also was the last day on his 10-day contract. It expired last night. And so, Julian Phillips, we'll talk about an injury update. There's not a bright injury update. So it seems more than likely we'll still have that provisional roster spot for Javonte Green. But for him to play on the Chicago Bulls play-in team, they're going to have to cut someone. And that may be why you saw Terry Taylor come out with the energy that he had, things like that. By the way, I didn't say it in the game recap. Shout out to Andre Drummond for having a double-double in only 10 minutes played. That's just great. Drummond just continues to just do crazy shit, right? You got to love Andre Drummond. But Javonte Green, for him to be on the Bulls play-in team, they're going to have to cut somebody to sign Javonte to an actual NBA contract. The biggest candidate of that is Terry Taylor. And no, it will not send the Bulls into the luxury tax due to it being a prorated contract. So, it's a chance and possibility of that. I would go on probably to say that it's probably likely that Javonte Green is end up retained at the end of the second 10-day contract, which would basically cover him almost until the end of the season. And then they'll probably make their decision on that. But expect to see Javonte Green back on a 10-day first. And then the Bulls are going to make a decision leading into that playing game on what to do with Javonte there. So that's what it comes down to. So he's just not under that provisional roster spot. He's not eligible for the playoffs or the play-in, but they'd have to sign him to a standard NBA deal, and we'll see if that happens. Now, with that said, we got a couple of updates on yesterday for Julian Phillips, and this one is not good, right? Billy Donovan saying this: nothing has changed in regards to Julian Phillips. I don't know the exact date of the return because he's still wearing a walking boot as a protective measure. In terms of how he felt when the boot originally went on his foot until now, there's improvement. He's going to eventually heal. It's just a matter of when he's able to get back on the floor, and is there any discomfort? And we don't know that because they're just trying to totally calm it down before they end up doing that. So I think he is feeling better with the boot on, but until he gets on the court, we probably aren't going to know much more. So Julian Phillips probably is not coming back for the Chicago Bulls the rest of the season. And that take that for what you will. Yeah, it's important for growth. It would be nice to have Julian Phillips back out there playing with his teammates leading into this playing tournament. But health is the most important thing. And like I said before, the Bulls aren't really competing for very much down the stretch outside of that playing game. So getting Julian Phillips healthy is the most important thing, especially when you got Javonte. You can sign him on a 10-day contract. So, that's an update to Julian Phillips. And apparently Zach LaVine, P. Will, and Lonzo Ball returned to Chicago last night. They were on the sidelines. And a lot of Bulls fans, were asking things like, well, why are they here now? Stuff like that. Apparently, they will continue their rehab in Chicago for the foreseeable future. So, whatever that means, Zach LaVine said last night that he feels like he's going to be cleared well before the initial time period they gave him. It still does not mean he's going to be there for the play-in. He's been ruled out for that. They're not going to bring him back in the season. I see some of you guys having your conspiracy theories on Zach LaVine is going to come back and save us in the play-in. It's not going to happen. But the fact that these three guys are back in Chicago for the next stages of the rehab probably means that Bulls doctors want to actually take a look at them, how they're progressing along. They'll eventually go back to work with their own individual doctors. They'll do that. So they're not going to stay in Chicago this whole time. But this is the time for the Bulls doctors to take a look at the progression that they've made up close and then kind of make some determinations. And I'm sure for the Bulls, that's important, especially, considering Patrick Williams' contract. Zach LaVine trade rumors. Reportedly, we heard that the Bulls are still, focused on moving Zach LaVine this offseason. We'll see if that actually happens. And then, of course, with Lonzo, that career-ending injury exception possibility is still there. So you still have all those things that are there. And, so having them back in the Bulls, facilities, doing their thing, rocking and rolling, it's going to be important to take a look at that to determine those next steps. But, not going to see any of these guys towards the end of the season, despite what some Bulls fans would want or would hope or think is possible. We're not going to see these guys, but getting them back healthy, especially for their respective different things they're dealing with this offseason, is going to be important. And I think most of these guys are going to be, except Lonzo, P. Will and Zach are going to be mainly healthy well before training camp, probably before the draft even. They'll be healthy back on the court, starting their offseason. Zach even said that he expects to have his normal offseason, being a full participant in whatever he does normally in the offseason. So that's good for him, good for the Bulls as well, no matter what the outcome of that is. So that's what it comes down to, man. But hey, the Bulls are now struggling into a period where they're heading into the postseason. Cool. And I hear the rah-rah things from the team. But at the end of the day, and I know I had my passionate rant last night on where I honestly think I was ranting for about 15, 20 minutes of nothing but pure gold on the post-game show last night. But ultimately it comes down to, I just want this team to be better. And I really want, I don't want no more wool being pulled over the eyes of Chicago Bulls fans. AK, Eversley, Billy Donovan, whatever it is, right? This team, they have to figure out what they really want this team to be and be proud of that this offseason. The signs for competitiveness, the excuses for lack of moves, clearly this team, this roster has shown you we need something. A full rebuild and blow up, like some people are calling for, I understand that's not going to happen. That's not even what I want to see. I just want to see you try to put out a roster that makes sense on the court together, right? We have so many pieces that just don't really fit well together, on top of us not moving without the ball, which I put a lot on coaching, because you should not allow that. You should not breathe an environment to where your players feel comfortable just watching somebody like DeMar DeRozan go to work. I'm not going to get fired up again. You want that rant, you got to go to that video. But when it comes down to it, while we go through these last 6 games of the season, and the Bulls do have 3 days off before they get back to it, find a way to kind of refocus, right? Just refocus. Give us some heartfelt games. Play with some pride out there over these last 6 games that you have left. And in that, the Chicago Bulls play Friday and Sunday, and then the last 4 games, they play 4 games over basically 6 days. So they're going to be playing a lot and then go basically right into the play-in. I don't know how much gap is between the end of the season and the play-in, but I know it's not a large one. So the Bulls have to, over this use this 3-game break to really kind of refocus and then come out playing hard for the last 6 games. But, and regardless of whatever happens over these last 6, like I've said many of time, it does not change what needs to be done this offseason. I don't know if AK and Eversley care. I don't know if Billy Donovan, I don't know that. That's not something that I can speak to. But overall, when you look at this team, we got 6 games left. And out of those 6 games, when you go back into the offseason, let's look at it and really say, can this front office build something that is really representative of what you have told us you want this team to be. This ain't it. The team that we have here isn't it. You got some really good young pieces and building blocks that you can build with. You don't have a player that you can build around yet, but you have a player that you can build with. You have players that you can build with, I should say. Continue doing that. Focus on doing something organically now. You went. You try to make your move, right? You try to make your flash pan move of getting Vooch, getting DeMar, getting Zoe, getting Caruso. And to help increase where the Bulls were before, we are out of the darkness that we were before, but we're into to a new dark place. And that new dark place is mediocrity, right? Yeah, you raised from being in the pits, but now you're in the pits of mediocrity. And now we need, again, it's going to take vision to really get us there. It's going to take a focus on how you draft. And the draft pick coming up for the Chicago Bulls is going to be an important one because that could be something you're adding talent to this team. But again, can you finally hit on one that can help the team right away? No more of these projects. They're going to take that are 2 or 3 years from being 2 or 3 years away. Right? And don't get me wrong. I love Julian Phillips. I love what he's flashed this season. I still like a lot of what Dalen Terry can bring. It's just the expectations for me now for him as being a really solid bench piece. Right? And that's fine. But you have to hit on something. You've seen Vooch out there. He's aging, and it's not going to get any better. Even if you take DeMar DeRozan off this team and he has his kind of his more natural spots to go back to and operate, he may be more efficient, but the slide is still coming. It's evident. It's there, right? You made an effort. You try to make a swing for it. I understand it in a lot of ways that I commend you for it, AK and Eversley. I commend you for it. But now it's time to pivot off that. And we're all eyes are on what the Bulls are going to do this offseason. How much do you really care? Or is it going to be another season where you try to sell us on competitiveness for a team that's competing to barely stay in the play-in? Let me know what you guys think on everything down below. Make sure you're following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. Thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.